What's up, everybody? I got a big sun flare right here in front of my camera. It's kind of annoying. There we go. That looks better, doesn't it? You want to see my beautiful face, right? This very humble face right here. Guys, I want to just talk to you a little bit about an article that I read. It was actually sent to me by a viewer on Facebook. Thank you to the viewer who sent that. I don't know if you want your name read out on the internet, so I never just read out people's names unless they send something to me and say, can you please quote me as the source? So if you do send me stuff, I highly appreciate it. I am incredibly accepting of any and all articles about Japan that you want to send me and have me analyze and speak on. And that being said, I think I should just jump into the point rather than rambling on with an intro. The name of the article, and I hope I get this right because it's a long article and I don't have like a computer or anything in front of me, no notes. It's called "Please Spare a Thought for the Western Man Trapped in Japan," and you can find it on japantimes.co.jp. I think you can find it on a couple other sites where it's been printed again, sourced again. So this article, in a brief synopsis, talks about how when an American man, or a man, I really should say a Western man, because it doesn't specifically choose Americans, it chooses, I think, one American, one German guy, may go into others, but I don't remember their stories. And it just says how they come here. Perhaps they had a lot of big plans and big ideas for their life in Japan, but if perchance they get married due to the fact that they get somebody pregnant, or they just jump into a marriage too quickly, or they don't go to school to study the language of Japanese, that they'll quickly be placed into a situation that's very hard for them to rise up the ladder, the corporate ladder, or any sort of ladder whatsoever, that they're kind of stuck in the middle of a trapped life. And, to a certain extent, I have to agree somewhat with this, but to another extent, I have to also say, who's placing the blame? Are these people placing the blame on Japan? Because, I mean, if they take absolutely zero credit for the blame, then, I think that's pretty unrealistic. And that's kind of what this article does. It doesn't really blame the people who set themselves up in this situation. It kind of blames Japan, and that's the thing I don't like about it. Don't get me wrong. It is a well-written, well-researched article. The writer, whose name I believe is Olga Gornova. I hope I've remembered that. I'm just trying to remember it off the top of my head, so I could totally have that wrong, and my pronunciation might be really bad too. But I couldn't find anything on the writer. You can click the link of their name, and it just gives a couple more articles that they've done on Japan Times. It doesn't give like a brief summary or anything like that. I clicked their RS feed, and it asked if I wanted to subscribe to a podcast, which I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I've clicked RS feeds before, and it usually gives me some sort of blog to read. Podcasts are cool, but I don't have time to sit down and listen to a bunch of podcasts about a person to learn about them. So I wish I knew a little bit more about the author. I feel I'm not well researched enough to compliment on this author's background in Japan, what they know about Japan, how long they've lived in Japan, if they've lived in Japan at all. So let's put that aside for right now and just say I'm ignorant on that aspect of this. If it comes back later that this person's had a long life in Japan, you know, perhaps I can retract some statements. But anyway, let's get into what the meat of the article is about. It talks about people who've set themselves up in situations in Japan where they're trapped. They can't get out. The first story it talks about is a 20-year-old American who comes to Japan with all these goals of becoming like a communist revolutionary, which, I guess that's cool if that's your goal. I'm not against anybody's creed or code or religion or political ways unless they, harm the rights of others. And it talks about how ambitious he was, that he wanted to lead these like communist riots and revolutions, and he was a Stalinist and had all these big political plans for himself. And then he got his girlfriend pregnant, and they had to get married and live out in the middle of the sticks, which just means like the countryside of Japan. And he had to buckle down and work a full-time English job, which out in the sticks probably doesn't pay very much. You're probably looking at anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 a month at most. and he's kind of stuck in that job. He can't get anything else out of Japan because he never learned to speak Japanese. His wife doesn't want to move from Japan, which I mean, you know, like, first of all, number one, guys, use fucking protection. Jesus H. Christ. I mean, you're 20 years old, you don't know to use protection. Anyway, accidents do happen, so let's push past that. Accidents happen. People get pregnant. You get your girlfriend pregnant. All right. Is it really good for you guys to get married? I mean, you need to be there for the kid. Does that mean you guys need to be married to do that? Not necessarily. I know that sucks, kind of the situation you put yourself in, but who's to blame? You guys, not the girlfriend and not you, both of you idiots for not using fucking protection. You know, don't blame the kid. So if you refuse to have an abortion, which I guess that wasn't an option, you know, I'm pro-choice. I feel like if you're not going to be able to make a great life for the kid, then it's not time to have kids yet. Some may disagree with this observation. That's fine. I'm not making this a pro-choice video. So moving on from there, we're pushing past those 2 points. So maybe you're, you know, pro-life. Maybe you forgot to use protection. You're to the point of getting married. Marriage is about compromises. Don't get married unless both of you can compromise. If your girlfriend can't compromise at all, or your fiance or whatever, and if you, the asshole guy, can't compromise, you know, if she's a bitch, don't marry her. If he's an asshole, don't marry him. If they can't compromise, fuck them. Find somebody else. There's a million fish in the sea for both of you. I don't understand this concept. Before I got married, I knew one thing. I probably wasn't even going to consider marriage until I was 30. Again, I want to reiterate the fact that I'm a 35-year-old man. People watch my videos and think I'm this like 21-year-old kid giving people advice. I'm a 35-year-old man, married 6 years, only married one time, never had a divorce, 2 kids, raising a very happy family, happily married to my wife. And the reason I'm happily married to my wife in Japan, who is a Japanese woman, is because I talked about everything that I envisioned for the future before we got married and before I signed anything, got into any kind of marriage contract, had kids, thought about kids, planned kids, all that stuff, man. That's just the most basic aspects of putting together a marriage. Marriage is not some kind of, you know, quick trip. Marriage isn't some kind of like quick date. It's totally different from dating. Marriage, if I were to really give it the most simple analysis and title I could, I would not put it up to a relationship. I would put it up to a job. It is a job. It is something you need to keep maintenance on constantly, check up on, make sure you're keeping track of, work hard to keep together, and constantly stay studious to make sure everyone within that job is happy. And that's for both parties. That's not the man, that's not the woman, that's both parties. And you're doing that also for the kids too. They're not responsible to make sure your marriage is healthy. Okay, if you try to put that on your kids, then your marriage is fucked up and you're fucked up. It should be between you and your wife. It should be a compromise between you and your wife. And it should be a compromise that's issued way before you even talk about getting married. Make sure your thoughts are on the same level. And if you don't, then you fucked up, man. I'm sorry, it's true. Maybe a divorce is in order, all right? That may suck for the kid, but what's gonna suck more? 2 people gruelingly unhappy and, you know, cruelly suffering in their own marriage, yelling at each other constantly in battle, not happy with their life or where they're going or their career, or 2 people who every once in a while check up on each other to pick up the kid and they're happy because they're going places they want to go in life, because the separation let them do that. I mean, you know, it doesn't always work that way. I'm giving you a very idealistic vision, but you've got to consider both, right? If it's not working out. Okay, so that's my biggest issue with that. We're talking about a 20-year-old guy who got supposedly, quote-unquote, trapped into a marriage with a woman who didn't want to leave Japan. I mean, we can't put this on the woman, we can't put this on the man. We have to put this on both of them. She was uncompromising in the fact that she doesn't want to leave Japan and that she wouldn't get an abortion, obviously. You know, she has every right to be that way. That's fine. She has every right. You know, it's her body, it's her choice, it's her country that she wants to stay in. She has every right. But he has every right, too, to say, fuck all that. I mean, you know, it doesn't make sense. Like, he's got to let her know, you know, he let himself be trapped. You know, he's got to let her know, look, I'm not ready to have a kid. Look, I'm not ready to stay in Japan the rest of my life. Look, I haven't finished my goals as far as what I want to complete as far as education. And if he can't stand up for himself and do that shit, what kind of man is he? Is he a man yet? He sounds like a little boy. Okay, let's move on to another one they had. They had a German guy there who talked about how he had got dumped by his girlfriend who was Japanese. And the reason that she dumped him is because she said he had no future in Japan because, number one, he was still in school. And this guy's going on 40 years old, they said, and he's still in school. He hasn't, I guess he's getting like a PhD or something like that. It must be high-level education, postgraduate education. He's still in school. He's 40, and they're like, so his girlfriend dumped him because she said he has no future in Japan. Number one, because by the time he gets out of school, he'll be 40 years old and his job opportunities will be very small. Number two, because he's not a native English speaker, so it'll be hard for him even to get an English teaching job, which isn't totally true. You can totally get a English speaking job, or English teaching job, I should say, if English is your second language. And from what I know, I mean, Germany's got a pretty high English literacy rate. So moving on from there, and then he talks about how like now he's gonna finish school and it doesn't look too bright for him. He doesn't know if he can get a teaching job. He doesn't know if he can get a normal Japanese job because even though he can speak fluent Japanese, that he's 40 and most companies won't want to take him. Well, dude, what the fuck were you doing? Like 40? Okay, man, I got a master's, right? I got a master's degree in art. It's a terminal degree because you can't go much higher than master's in art. As far as I know, I haven't found a PhD program back in the States that goes to PhD level art unless it gets into like a specific type or something like that. Terminal master's degree in art. Like I finished that ages ago. Ages ago. Like I was 23? 23. Okay, I'm 35 now. What the fuck are you doing? PhD? Okay, like I've got a friend who became a foot doctor, okay, a pod doctor, I believe he calls himself. Went to high school together, he went to college, and he told me, now when I go to college, I'm gonna go non-stop, and I'm probably not gonna finish till I am 35 years old. He just finished college now, and he went non-stop, and he's a foot doctor, he's gonna make a ton of money, he's gonna do awesome. His dad was a brain surgeon, he was literally a brain surgeon. He's a super smart guy, like, incredibly rich, incredibly successful. He finished at 35, 5 years ago, right? Five years before, I shouldn't say 5 years ago now, because he's the same age as me, but 5 years before this guy who's gonna finish at 40. What the fuck are you studying? Like, it never tells us what his major is. I think he's studying something within like Japanese culture and Japanese language and tradition and history, which it's, you know, probably a combined thing of all this different stuff in Japanese. That's cool, that's awesome. I mean, I think education is super important. I'm not mocking the fact that you're getting a great education, okay? Education is super important. I think it's important to learn every day. Even when you finish college, you need to be learning every day. You need to be studying, reading books, learning the language. I think it's super important that you learn the language of the country that you're in. To expect them to speak your country's language is stupid. It's pathetic. And it's a horrible excuse if you say that's the reason you can't get a job, is because you can't speak another country's language that you're living in. That's just disrespectful. It makes you look ignorant. But here's the thing, this guy's 40. He's finishing college now when he's 40. And they're saying, oh, because he's going to be 40, Japan's not going to give him a chance. Bro, I'm going to tell you something. You finish college at 40 in any country, you're not going to have much of a chance, because education's great. I just reiterated that, okay? Education's awesome. But you know what's even more awesome when you get into a job and you show them your resume and you go to an interview? Job experience. That's way more fucking awesome. People are going to look at that a hell of a lot more than all the simulations that you've been through, all the books that you've read and stuff like that. That stuff's great. That's really good. I mean, it's great to have a ton of knowledge. But is it job useful? Like, for example, like I said, they don't list exactly what his studies are, but if they are Japanese, I mean, how is that even going to help get a job at a Japanese company? I mean, if you can speak Japanese, it's awesome. But if you know a lot about Japanese tradition and history, maybe it's going to help you a little bit with the wa, or the harmony in the workplace, which is cool. That'll help you with like the working environment. But like actual Japanese history isn't really going to help you too much with actually like landing an IT job or something like that. I mean, that's cool. You know, I've studied tons of stuff on Edo era Japan, Meiji era, you know, everything from like one of the first things written, Tales of the Genji, like to Hyakumonogatari, Hokusai manga, everything. I try to study a little bit of everything in history. I am by no means a Japanese history expert. I just feel like I've barely touched on the subject, even those few things I've said. None of it has helped me in any job that I've ever had, aside from maybe like the art job that I have now, where once in a while a client says, I want a monster drawn and I want the monster to have this kind of Japanese influence. Hold on, I'm gonna move my bag real quick. That's the only time it's ever really helped me at all. But for the most part, I mean, Japanese history hasn't really helped me much. You know, no offense to Japan. Japan's super interesting. The history is super interesting. It's rich. It's far greater and goes on far longer than anything I have in America. And it's got some incredible stories. I mean, just read a little bit about Nobunaga, and you're going to go on for ages about a super interesting samurai warrior with a massive history of, you know, the conquest of Japan. But all the knowledge of Nobunaga in the world isn't going to land me an IT job in Japan, or even an English teaching job for that matter. What's going to land me a job is having experience in the field and mastery of the Japanese language and lexicon that goes around that field. For example, I need to know those IT words in both English and Japanese. I need to know whatever job I want to work with the same Japanese language. I need to know the keigo, the polite language that helps me work that job. And this is something the article doesn't go into. It's very one-sided. It kind of just talks about these guys who, quote-unquote, are trapped in Japan. You are never trapped in Japan. If you are trapped in Japan, I'm going to say you pretty much have only yourself to blame. I saw later down in the comments, someone who I've mentioned recently in videos, Edo Inoue, I've got that name correct, commented that he feels like a lot of these people who complain about Japan do have only themselves to blame because they've spent years partying, going out drinking, hanging out with non-J friends, and some J friends who only want to speak English, and wasted a lot of time not studying the language. And to Mr. Inoue, who I respect, I think he's a very intelligent man, and I've quoted him in the past with the Debito type argument that he had about racism in Japan and stuff. I think he's handled stuff very well. With this, I'm going to have to disagree with him somewhat. I think you still have yourself to blame, even if you didn't learn any of the language and you can't be successful. You shouldn't even use that as an excuse, like, oh, I didn't learn the language, so, you know, Japan's really harsh on me just because I didn't learn the language. No, you're still an idiot, because if you can't be successful even without having learned the language, then I don't know what you're doing. Okay, like, you could start your own English school with 0 Japanese, okay? You get yourself a Japanese partner who will handle that aspect of it. They work everything out for you. You know, you work out the business side, the money, the accounting, you know, the books. You can get it done. Take me, for example. I've got an art company in Japan. I have like maybe 1 or 2 Japanese clients, and that's it. I do speak to them in Japanese. I always have to draw very, very simple stuff for them because my descriptions are bland, to say the least. I'm not that great still. I take Japanese lessons every week. I've been doing it all this year. I've studied Japanese for ages in the past, but I didn't have a structure until now. Now I go by a structured private teacher who gives me, you know, structured lessons that are helping my grammar. But I still have a long way to go to be like native level, I would say. I mean, I can speak, I'm fluent enough that I can speak and understand and do most things. If I get into a deep political or scientific conversation, I'm lost. But here's the thing. I don't rely on the fact that I have to know Japanese to be successful in Japan. Almost all my clients for my art company, Unrested Studios, are in the UK, they're in Australia, and the reason for that is because the type of RPGs that I illustrate for are popular in those countries. I have some American ones too, but America still tends to shy away from a lot of RPGs due to the fact that they attach like Satanism and stuff, and religion is still kind of strong in America. UK and Australia have evolved past that. So I've got most of my clients there, and of course they all speak English. And I'm completely successful with that. I'm very happy with how I do. The only time that business dips is during Christmas time when products go out. And during that time, I keep an English job on the side where I teach at a youchien. And that keeps me pretty fat paid. I'm pretty damn happy. You guys have seen what my house looks like in the background. I'm not renting that house. That house is my house. I bought it. It's on a mortgage. I'm 1/3 of the way paid off on my mortgage. I've refurbished the whole inside of the house. It looks pretty damn good, I think you would say. My wife is also a successful career woman. I let her know from day one that we will both be working. I will not be marrying a housewife. And that's another thing this article gets into. It talks about how Western men are surprised that when they marry their Japanese girlfriend, who at first starts out romantic, they eventually evolve into this shufu, or the professional housewife. talk to your girlfriend about this stuff before you get married. Like, if you didn't see this coming, then you didn't ask her about any kind of compromising signs for the future. I don't understand. And I've seen this, and this is where I've got to agree with Mr. Or Mrs. I don't know. What did I say the name was again? Olga? Olga sounds like a woman's name, isn't it? Olga Gornova. Is Olga a woman's name? I'm sorry, Olga. If you're a woman or you're a man and I'm messing this up, I apologize. That I should have researched this better, as far as if that's a male or female name. I believe Olga is a woman's name. Sounds like a woman's name. Gornova, I cannot figure out what country Gornova would be from. So anyway, I'm getting way off on a tangent. Yeah, these men who marry these women, this does happen in Japan. Olga is 100% right about this. There is so many men who come over here and marry like the first Japanese girl that they start going out with. Of course, in that one guy's case, he got his girlfriend pregnant and decided to have the kid and get married, which there's some honor in. I respect that. That's pretty cool, but there still should be some compromise on both sides. There should be some talking about it before you get married. On top of that, a lot of these guys who do this, I mean, I guess they can blame their situation if they want to, but a true analyzation of the situation comes to the fact that neither person talked about the future, neither person compromised, and neither person made any kind of sort of future plans for their marriage or talked about what their expectations were. And that's just marrying like a bunch of idiots. I mean, that's just idiotic foresight. I mean, I don't understand why you would get into a long-term relationship without, I mean, you don't need to have things in writing, but Japan won't hold you down as far as like if you marry a woman and suddenly, you know, a lot of these MGTOW guys who say they don't want to get married because the woman will then divorce them, have all these kids, and then receive alimony and child support and everything. Japan doesn't force you to do that. You can get married, have kids, divorce the woman, and not pay any alimony or any child support, which I think is kind of dodgy, really. If under certain circumstances, I think that's like super dodgy. But Japan doesn't force you to do that, so you're not like financially bound to this woman. If things go horribly wrong, you can escape. So to say that these guys are trapped is bullshit. To say that these guys can't get out of that, that's bullshit. I mean, they can head back to their own country. Aside from being military, if they're part of the military, then the military will actually hold them to paying child support and hold them to paying alimony. And there's actually Japanese women who will go out of their way to find these kind of guys and just become, you know, leeches off of their alimony. And don't get me wrong, ladies, I'm not saying women go out of their way to do this. I'm just saying certain women do despicable stuff like that. Men are just as equally guilty of doing despicable stuff. I'm not saying one sex is more, you know, devious than the other. Both are equally guilty. Both are equally good too. There's really good people in both too. I'm just taking worst case scenarios from both. Okay. You know, and as far as the worst case scenario goes with these idiot guys, they marry the first hot piece of ass they see. They're a loser in their own country. They never fucking got one single date. They either didn't learn how to talk to women or women never noticed them because they never did anything to get noticed. For example, they just sat around all the time, not working on their own, you know, self-discipline, their own studies, their own, you know, body upkeep and stuff like that, and then keep wondering why like they can't have any kind of conversation or interaction with a woman. You got to put a little bit of time and effort into yourself first before you put a little bit of time and effort into another person, right? You can't expect this person to have all sorts of respect for you when you've had zero respect for yourself beforehand. And that's something that always pisses me off, is like, then they come over here, you know, they're popular here because, as the article even says this from like the very beginning of it, is that Western guys are seen as more attractive when they come over here. I have seen some ugly looking dudes with some of the hottest women I have ever seen in my life. And I'm not saying these guys are unsuccessful or not in a happy marriage. Some of them are completely successful in a super happy marriage. I saw this one IT guy one time. He was rich beyond belief, super fat nerd. I mean, just like the worst clothes ever, giant belly, wearing a sweater vest with his like gut just overlapping his belt. His wife smoking hot, smoking hot. She was a housewife. He was totally happy with his situation, owned his own IT company in Japan, had studied Japanese, super rich, doing awesome, loving life. You know, more power to him. But for the guys who come over here and marry the first hot girl they ever get to date the first time in their life, and then suddenly find out that that girl wants the shufu lifestyle, which is like their professional life is being a housewife. They stay at home, they don't work, you do all the work, you become dedicated to your job, you become obsessed with your job to the point that you're almost never home, never get to see your kids, never get to see your wife, never have a home life. Your only time outside of work is drinking parties. You know, they're not happy with that life. But did you study anything about Japan before you came here? Did you learn a little bit about the culture and how that's how it works? You get overworked, you get underpaid. You know, you get grinded to the bone with, you know, things like karoshi as part of the language, death from overwork. You shouldn't be surprised by these things. I'm not saying that makes them right. I'm not saying that's good for Japan. I'm not saying it's a great country for working its people into the ground. No, that's a horrible thing. But if you didn't learn about that before you got over here, who's really to blame? You or Japan? Are you really going to put that all on Japan? Oh, it's their fault because they have this culture that I didn't study. Come on. Come on. And for marrying the first hot piece of ass that you see, guys or girls doing this, as I've said before in the past, that beauty has a shelf life. You are an idiot if you are marrying someone just for how they look. That beauty has a shelf life. That handsome guy has a shelf life. They're going to turn into a person who is unattractive no matter what. Both will. They will become old, wrinkly, you know, their features will deform, they will become, you know. So you got to look at the personality, you got to look at the career path, you got to look at the love for life, the pursuit of things, of goals, of the future, of plans for the future, how well they planned out for the future. You've got to look at things like that way before you look at if someone's a hot piece of ass or a handsome guy. And it just sounds like a lot of the times what's happened is someone's just jumped on the, oh, that's a hot girl boat and married so quickly that they haven't thought any future for their marriage life at all. And who's really to blame them? You really going to blame Japan for that one? Come on, guys. Really? Anyway, guys, that's just my 2 cents on the article. I'll link the article here in the video below. I'd love to hear your comments on this. What are your thoughts on it? How you feel? Are men really trapped in Japan because they chose to get married? Are men really trapped in Japan because they chose not to study Japanese? Are men really trapped in Japan because they can't climb the corporate ladder in Japan? There's some truth to that as far as not being able to climb the corporate ladder. Yes, we'll never be Japanese. We are Gaijin, and we will forever be Gaijin. Even if we become a Japanese citizen and get a Japanese passport, we are forever Gaijin. There's no way we're going to somehow go in a time machine, reverse life, and grow up as a Japanese child here in Japan and learn everything they did about the culture. You know, the very idiosyncrasies that you just can't learn unless you grew up here. But why would we blame the country for that? Why can't we blame ourselves? I mean, I'm not saying, you know, it's 100% on us, but I'm not saying it's 100% on Japan either. And it's not 100% on the wives that these guys marry. Okay? It's a little bit of everybody, and everybody needs to take their equal blame. Until next time, I'm Unrested. This has been JFAQ. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe.